can you say how many people might be doing crimes like you were doing?
It would be a guess, but it's not. It's far more than 35.
That was Ed Kemper in 1984. And more than 40 years later, we're still asking basically the same question. How many serial killers are out there right now? I've heard the number 25 to 50 for years. Comes from the FBI. That's terrifying enough. But then I kept looking. I found an article from the National Institute of Justice saying that one estimate for the number of American serial killers who have never been prosecuted was as high as 2,000. 2,000. Then I found an actual statistical paper with quite possibly the most convenient title imaginable, estimating the number of serial killers that were never caught. Their estimate was roughly 7. So now we have Ed Kemper saying far more than 35, the FBI estimating 25 to 50 active killers, another estimate that gets us all the way to 2,000, and a statistical model that lands at roughly 7. Great. We've narrowed it down beautifully. So today, I want to figure out what we actually do know, where those famous numbers came from, and whether it's even possible to estimate how many serial killers are active in the United States right now. Welcome to Breakfast Cereal. My name's Josh. Now, before we start pulling apart all those numbers, I want you to give me your number. No, not your phone number or your body count, regardless of what you think body count means. No, I mean, how many serial killers do you think are active in the United States right now? Take a guess. 5, 20, 50, 100? And I want you to answer a second question too. Do you think there's an active serial murder case happening somewhere right now? Because I've noticed a bunch of you guys bringing up Austin, Texas, for example, in the comments lately. Or Chicago, for that matter. And hey, just to be extremely clear, I'm not saying there's currently a serial killer operating in Austin or Chicago. But the fact that people are asking that question, it's kind of the whole point of this episode. Because you see, I went into this assuming there had to be a decent estimate out there somewhere. Surely, the FBI must have some idea how many serial killers are active. Which, now that I hear myself say it out loud, it's kind of a ridiculous expectation. How would they know? Now, as usual, we have to start with the most boring part, the definition. One of the first problems with the famous 25 to 50 number is the word active. It sounds obvious until you try to define it. So imagine somebody murdered 3 people between 2021 and 2024 and has not killed anyone since. Is that person active in 2026? I mean, maybe they stopped. Maybe they're in prison for an unrelated crime. Or maybe they kill again next year. I mean, think about it. We only know where the series ended after enough time has passed to look backward. And that makes active an oddly retrospective category. Kind of an oxymoron, actually. So look at Zodiac. And yeah, I know I've talked about Zodiac a lot lately, but he's a good example again. We know the Zodiac murders happened. Investigators recognized that multiple attacks were connected, and the killer himself went out of his way to make sure the public understood that there was a recurring offender. So during the Zodiac murders, there was an identifiable active serial killer case, even though investigators did not know who the killer was. That is the version that we tend to imagine, right? Somewhere there's a serial killer. Police know there is a serial killer, and everybody is trying to identify him. But a lot of cases don't look like that at all. Samuel Little, arrested in 2012 on a narcotics charge. DNA then connected him to 3 unsolved Los Angeles murders, and he was convicted of those killings in 2014. Only later did investigators begin uncovering the enormous scale of his crimes. Eventually, Little confessed to 93 murders, and the FBI matched dozens of those confessions to known cases. For decades, many of those murders existed individually, without investigators understanding that they were connected or belonged to a single offender. That means Little had been an active serial killer long before police, or anyone, understood they had a Samuel Little serial murder series. And that distinction is going to become incredibly important. Because when people ask how many serial killers are active right now, I think what they're really asking is how many people are currently killing multiple victims, whether we know there is a series or not. So maybe the biggest mistake we make when imagining an active serial killer is picturing Zodiac. We imagine police departments looking at a map covered in pins, knowing the same person is killing repeatedly and desperately trying to identify him. Active serial killer does not necessarily mean active serial killer investigation. And that is the blind spot that we're trying to measure, which brings us to the number that supposedly measures it. You probably heard some version of the claim that the FBI estimates that there are 25 to 50 active serial killers in the United States at any given time. I've repeated versions of that statistic myself, so I wanted to find out where it actually came from. A National Institute of Justice article footnotes the figure and traces it back to former FBI investigator John Douglas and his 1995 book, Mindhunter. Sound familiar? Yeah, that guy. The father of criminal profiling, essentially. This photo's pretty hilarious though, right? Yeah, we get it. Guy's an investigator. Anyway, Douglas said he believed there could be somewhere between 25 and 50 active serial killers in the United States at any one time. So, yeah, this is not a live FBI estimate being constantly updated at Quantico. There isn't some huge counter on the wall that says like, active serial killers, 37. Then like somebody like runs into the room and changes it to 38. Oh shit, another one. It's just a historical estimate from John Douglas. Maybe an experienced estimate, but it's still an estimate. Which brings us back to Ed Kemper. Sometimes you'll see Kemper's answer, that one that I played at the beginning,
Far more than 35.
described as an informed guess. And I got a problem with that phrase. Informed by what? Why would Ed Kemper know how many serial killers were active in the United States simply because he happened to be one himself? I mean, if I rob a bank, do I suddenly just know how many other active bank robbers are out there? Kemper had firsthand knowledge of being Ed Kemper. And yeah, that potentially makes him useful in a profiling sense. And if you want to ask about his fantasies, his behavior, how he selected victims, how he avoided detection, or how he rationalized what he was doing. But the interviewer was asking him a completely different question. How many other people are secretly committing multiple murders across the United States, Ed? What information does Kemper actually possess that would allow him to answer that? I mean, if you guys didn't know, serial killers, they don't have a club. They weren't getting together for an annual convention or something. Kemper's not, meeting Bundy and Gacy every second Thursday, comparing numbers. The first thing he says, though, is...
It would be a guess.
Exactly. It's a guess. But why guess, Ed? Again, based on what? It's not a fucking jar full of gumballs. A better answer would be, yeah, I got no idea. Could be 10, could be 10,000. I mean, who knows? A guess does not become evidence because the person doing the guessing murdered somebody. And that turns out to be a recurring problem throughout this episode. Everybody wants a number. Kemper gave us one. John Douglas gave us another. So how about we stop asking serial killers and profilers for a minute and see whether the actual data gets us any closer. We can see how strange this gets by going back to our old friend, the Radford Serial Killer Database. Yes, it's back again. I mean, at this point, I should probably just start shooting my videos at Radford University. An older version of the Radford statistics estimated an average of 54 known serial killers active per year between 2010 and 2015. That sounds like an answer. 54. There we go. Except, wait, directly underneath that table is a very important note explaining that it only includes American serial killers who had been caught and identified. That completely changes what the statistic means. The chart tells us how many serial killers we eventually learned were operating during those years. And that's the difference between a historical count and a real-time count. If the known data cannot tell us how many are hidden, then the obvious next question is, how large could that hidden group actually be? This is where I started looking at research on serial killers who were never caught. If we want to understand how many active killers might currently be invisible to us, research on uncaught and unrecognized offenders gives us some idea of how large the blind spot might be. And this is where the numbers get really wild. In 2020, the National Institute of Justice published an article about connections between serial killers and cold cases. It says estimates vary, but one estimate placed the number of serial killers in the United States who had never been prosecuted for their crimes as high as 2,000. 2,000. Sounds very official. National Institute of Justice. Department of Justice website. 2,000 uncaught serial killers. Case closed. Except if you watched my last episode, the America episode, you probably remember the single word that caused all kinds of problems in that one. Identified. Well, today, we got another word. Estimate. Because the National Institute of Justice did not calculate the 2,000 figure itself. The citation leads to a 2018 Live Science article, which in turn discusses an estimate from Thomas Hargrove, founder of the Murder Accountability Project. Getting into the weeds here, folks. Just stay with me, okay? So this Hargrove guy said that he had asked contacts at the FBI to examine unsolved murders in their database and determine how many were connected through DNA to at least one other unsolved murder. Yeah, finally. Now we're getting somewhere, right? We got multiple unsolved murders connected to each other with DNA. That sounds serial. Hargrove's FBI contacts reportedly identified roughly 1,400 murders that met his criteria, representing about 2% of the cases they examined. Hargrove himself argued that 1,400 almost certainly represented just the floor, because many murders don't contain usable DNA. So to account for that, guy seems to have just kind of rounded up. 2,000, ballpark. Okay, yeah, I'm sure a little more went into it than that, but still, let's keep in mind what the number means. The number is an attempt to estimate the size of a very difficult, hidden problem. And there's another complication too. See, never prosecuted does not mean currently walking around. Some offenders may be dead. Some may already be locked up for completely unrelated crimes, which is a popular Zodiac theory, by the way. And some might eventually be identified. Look at the Golden State Killer. So the figure of 2,000 is interesting because it shows us how much uncertainty could exist in the unsolved homicide pool. But it certainly isn't, a current serial killer census. And depending on how narrowly you define that hidden population, the number can collapse very quickly. So now I'm going to make it even worse. I found yet another paper titled Estimating the Number of Serial Killers That Were Never Caught. The 2021 paper by Simkin and Roy Chowdhury, I think I got that pronunciation right. It approaches the question completely differently. Instead of starting with unsolved murder files, they built a statistical model using information from known American serial killers. They looked at how many murders offenders committed, how much time passed between murders, the ages at which offenders began killing, and even the American life table showing the probability that someone would still be alive at different ages. Then, they simulated 1 million hypothetical killers. The idea is actually pretty clever. See, each time a simulated offender kills, there's some probability that the offender makes a mistake and gets caught. If that does not happen, time passes and eventually the offender either kills again, gets caught later, or dies before ever being identified. In the simulation, 729,000 offenders committed at least 2 murders and were eventually caught. Another 2,048 committed at least 2 murders and died without ever being caught. The researchers then took that ratio and applied it to a sample of 1,172 known American serial killers from the 20th century. Their estimate for the number who might have died without ever being caught was 7.107. Basically 7. The 7 figure sounds absurdly low until you understand exactly what the model is asking. Essentially, the question is, if uncaught serial killers behave statistically like serial killers we eventually did catch, how many would we expect to die before the normal processes that tend to identify serial killers eventually catch up with them? It's a mathematical model constructed from the behavior of a population we already know about. And there is an unavoidable philosophical problem and, frankly, scary question. What if the serial killers who successfully disappeared forever behaved differently from the people we caught? The model cannot know that because the only offenders available to build the model on are, by definition, offenders who became visible to us. It's not necessarily a flaw unique to this paper. It's the basic problem of studying almost any hidden population. You use the people you can see to try to estimate the people you cannot. But it does raise an uncomfortable possibility that applies directly to our question. The killers we are missing may be missing because something about their behavior makes them difficult to recognize in the first place. Whoa. I don't know about you guys, but this has been pretty heavy. I mean, a lot of numbers. A lot of grim numbers. What do you maybe we should just let's stop for a second, cleanse the palate, so to speak. Here.
Hans Moleman Productions presents Man Getting Hit by Football.
What a classic. Okay. Should we move on? Let's go. The size of the blind spot. Even if we temporarily ignore every estimate of serial killing, the wider pool of unresolved cases shows how difficult this problem can become. The National Institute of Justice estimated in 2020 that the United States had approximately 250,000 unresolved homicides. That does not include every person who disappeared without a confirmed homicide. And NamUs, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, contains tens of thousands of unresolved missing person cases. But most missing people are not murder victims. Most unsolved murders are not serial murders, and most unidentified remains are not the work of serial killers. I'm not suggesting that hundreds of thousands of victims are sitting in some gigantic pool waiting for BTK2 to be discovered. It's not what these numbers mean. What they show us is the size of the ocean investigators are searching. A hidden serial murder series only has to occupy a tiny little part of that ocean to be incredibly difficult to notice. Would we catch them now? Probably. If you watched my Where Did All the Serial Killers Go episodes, linked above and below, you already know where this part's headed. DNA databases, better information sharing, cell phones, surveillance cameras, license plate readers, digital records, and forensic genetic genealogy all make it increasingly difficult for separate crimes to remain separate forever. So even if the true number of active serial killers has fallen dramatically, we still can't stand here in 2026 and count every person whose series has not yet been recognized. So with all that in mind, I want to check back in with the number you gave me at the beginning. What's your number now? The people we most desperately want included in today's number are precisely the people we do not know about yet. And maybe the most successful active serial killer right now doesn't look anything like Zodiac. Zodiac became famous precisely because everybody knew there was a Zodiac. The offender we're trying to count may have no name, no nickname, no documentary, and no Wikipedia page. And maybe right now, that offender is finished forever. Or maybe he's going to kill again next month. We can't know the difference yet. So, how many serial killers are active right now? I have no idea. Could be 10, could be 50. Maybe it's fewer than any of us think. But if somebody gives you an exact number, the first question I would ask is the same question we've been asking throughout this entire episode. Based on what?